So, in my view, the federal government is not taking the issue of middle class homeownership seriously. They seem to think that as long as they create enough rental supply, that it's fine that young middle class Canadians will never have the opportunity to own their home. I personally think that's misguided. And I'm like a center left guy who is ideologically inclined to give the federal government the benefit of the doubt, or at least this federal government the benefit of the doubt. But they are driving me absolutely up the wall with their inability or refusal to talk about middle class homeownership. I think they've totally lost the script. And as someone who is less ideologically inclined to agree with this current federal government, I'd love to get your take. Am I completely at the lunch here?
No, you're absolutely not out to lunch. Look, I'm also for more rental supply and non-market housing. We desperately need both. But the minister's approach is missing the biggest and most foundational part of Canada's housing crisis. The reality is that most young Canadians still want to own homes, not just for wealth building, but for the stability and having the space to start a family that comes with them. And the reality is, renting isn't inherently bad, but in Canada, you don't have that, the ability to really grow a family and have that stability and know that you're going to be in a community long term when you're renting. So when you focus only on non-market housing and rentals, you're essentially abandoning an entire segment of young professionals and middle-class Canadians who make too much to qualify for subsidized housing, but then can't afford anything in the actual market. And these are people with decent or even very good jobs who are completely priced out, but will never qualify for that non-market housing. And so what's exactly the plan for them? Like rent forever and just hope for the best? I don't think that's going to fly. And so really, it's frankly politically tone deaf. Young Canadians didn't give up on homeownership because they decided renting was better or because they're hoping for government handouts. They're being forced out of a market that used to be accessible to the middle class just a generation ago. And, they're watching Canada's social and economic contract being torn up and stomped on in front of them over and over again by the Robertsons of the world. And that's going to lead to some very ugly places. The solution to all of this isn't to abandon homeownership. It's to fix it by building that missing middle housing and getting excess demand out of the system.
Yeah, I agree that this needs to be what I call an and conversation. So it should not be, having rentals or home ownership. We need both. We need lots more of both, and we need to find ways that young Canadians can own a unit in that missing middle housing, right? So maybe the homes of 2050 don't look like the homes of 1950, but can you own a piece of that, your unit in a fourplex? Could you own a larger home in a low-rise apartment? That kind of thing. But I think it's important that the federal government articulate its vision and tell it to voters. Like, if they truly believe that we should be moving to a society of renters, they should let people know that and let people vote on it. And what worries me is that this is going to be seen as basically bait and switch, that young people are going to be like, hey, I never voted for this. I never agreed to that. And we saw that, quite a bit when it came to, temporary foreign workers, the big international student boom. One of the things I kept hearing over and over again is like, hey, I never voted for this. I never agreed to this. This was just kind of getting imposed on me. And I worry that the federal government's doing the same thing on housing, where they're refusing to articulate a vision beyond just, hey, we're going to double housing starts. Okay, great. But like, what kind of housing? Who's going to be able to own it? And so on. And if we see, 3, 4, 5 years where it's just rental, 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 I really worry that we are breaking that social contract, and young people are going to say like, hey, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I agreed with. And, I just think it's inherently unfair that the generations before me had these opportunities, which now you've taken away without ever asking me, hey, is this okay?
Yeah, for sure. And, young people are already so angry and disillusioned and frustrated with the system, and they have every right to be. And they're only going to get more so if this is how they're going to continue. I think part of it comes down to the fact that we've talked about this. If housing ownership is going to become affordable for the middle class or even young professionals, home prices do need to come down. And I think that this Liberal government still doesn't want to face that reality. They want to have their cake and eat it too. And you just can't when it comes to housing affordability.
So, to learn more about the issues affecting Canada's young urban middle class, please follow The Missing Middle.